I pass to Jan.
Did you say it to me? Okay, didn't quite get that. I was doing my press the button thing. Well, I've been stewing away for quite a while about organizing in this bioregion, and who are the first, how to gather the first people and how it flows out and a lot of that. And then I thought, really what I think I would like to do is to know that if I'm engaging people here, that the sense of that being aware that this region is part of a larger movement is so important. So then I decided to jump into putting out an invitation to organize the whole Columbia River watershed. So I'm naming that today, and now I have to figure out kind of how to set that up in ER, and also I've been looking through Hilo a little bit, what's happening there. And so and feeling that importance. And I think that Benji has so well demonstrated this, as has Jonathan, about organizing bioregions and having other people in ER be there as kind of champions of a process of how we engage together regarding the place, the physical place. So knowing that that's such a big step for so many people. So it's like how to be quite mindful of how the depth of connection and culture and capacities that have been developed here, whether and how we can be intentional champions for other people to start their bioregions feels really important to how we see that. So I've just been thinking about that more, and then thinking about how to see if that could happen throughout the Columbia River bioregion, knowing that it's a really large bioregion and so big that it's not really a bioregion, it's a watershed, and within it, it's got so many different bioregions. So so it's just like how far to cast the net kind of thing that I'm kind of working through, and writing up some things. So I may at some point just tap a few of you on your shoulder and say, this is what I've written so far and would love your feedback. So that's kind of my bioregional check-in. And at times it really, really energizes me. And other times I just go, yeah, that the old feeling of the number of times I've started something innovative and how bloody hard it is and painful. And I just want to go back and hide in my cave again. And it's, it's, yeah, that initiating energy and what it takes to do that. And I'm glad, Claire, you're nodding your head, and I think many people know what that's like. So then as an agenda thing, I might put in a little bit, because I know you're talking about the Salmon Nation. I'd be curious about the Salmon Nation and the use of Hilo, and other people's use of Hilo, and whether or not they're seeing that as being another place of connection, or how that works with ER. So that's one thing I'll put on, and I will pass it to Grace. It's so good to see you here.
Hi, thanks. I'm glad you passed it to me, because there's so many things in what you said that were relevant. So I'm just getting started and trying to find my feet in this group. I'm an expert on regional governance and new forms of economy, and that's kind of the puzzle piece I'd like to be able to contribute to different places. If you guys are looking at anything around like how do we find alternatives to money or whatever, I'm your guy.
Grace, can I just ask you to speak up? I'm not hearing fully.
All right, is that better?
Yeah.
I have a volume button on my machine, and if I use it, then magically things get better. So yeah, if any of you are thinking about new forms of whatever it is, digital democracy or new forms of economy. That's the crux of what I've been doing at regional and global levels. So particularly non-monetary stuff, but I know there has to be a combination at least to do that transition. And I've been living in Slovenia for about 5 years, and I'm not here. And we've been reading through some government reports about the coal mining regions that are in the north of the country. And there's a government sort of report. It's supposed to be a plan of what to do about them, but because coal mining has kind of been rejected by the people more or less, like they don't want their families working in that, and they don't want tearing up the, and so it's about economic recovery and stuff. So there's really this government report which doesn't have a plan, and we're working on how do we put together a plan and get to the right people and get, because there's clearly government funding for this kind of thing and EU funding for this kind of thing, and sort of make a a budget. We've made a budget for the first phase of bioregional regeneration, of identifying the parties and stuff like that, and we're looking at who the right people are to approach with that. So that's really exciting for me that we're starting to do that, and I'm really interested also in starting this conversation at a European level. I've talked to the people, and the woman in Devon who's doing something there, and I know there's a guy in Sicily that comes to some of these calls, and I have a connection in Sweden who's doing some stuff, and some people in Portugal. And so I feel there's a lot of room here to bring those forces together. And again, that's sort of looking at how do I manage my time in a way that I have the time for that as well. And also, yeah, I see myself as being able to coordinate that in a way, and not as necessarily as a bioregional regenerator myself, just because I'm not from this region, but somebody who can really instigate that and connect people with one another and connect bioregions to other bioregions, and kind of have that overall coordination capability. And like I said, and hopefully contribute to the movement in terms of anybody who needs what I'm working on. So I'm pretty excited about what the potential is here, because this is this particular region is very positive in terms of caring about the environment and not really being willing to let the government pass anti-environment laws, and so, yeah, and the young people want to get involved in that. So it looks like there's a lot of people, like when I talk about it here, and then somebody introduced me to somebody in Serbia, which is a couple countries over. So it just feels like there's something coming up from the ground around me and gravitating towards me in terms of being able to create a European group speaking about these things and supporting one another. So I'm excited about that. And I think I've been really down this week. I've been really disturbed by the stuff that happened in Ohio and Pennsylvania. I'm like, wow, boy, you can undo a couple hundred years of work in a second. And but then I was listening to the Team Human podcast about mycelial networks and how like fungus can like eat oil and stuff. And I just thought, well, there's hope. Like this is, this whole thing was created from some kind of like primordial sludge. And, even if a lot of things turn back into primordial sludge, there'll be some microorganism that'll eat it. And it just gave me hope again. So that's sort of where I am. And I will pass to RJ.
Yeah, here in northeastern Pennsylvania, Appalachian Edge, Allentown is one of the cities, Lenape lands, and we're starting to see more evidence of Lenape influence, which has really been tamped down for many, many years. There is a watershed conference coming up for the entire Delaware River watershed, which stretches all the way from New York State through Pennsylvania, along New Jersey, past Philadelphia into the Delaware Basin and into the Atlantic Ocean. And I think I'm going to go to it because there is interestingly enough, one of the 4 tracks is a so-called indigenous track. And I want to hear what is actually being talked about in that. And I believe there will be indigenous people who are very much involved in that track. So that's coming up in March, and I don't really have to prepare for that. I just need to go to it. I'm thinking a lot about, again, more and more constantly about communities, because the actual on the ground work is going on in the communities when communities know they're actually communities. And we have no lack of people who are involved. In many cases, they're spread pretty thin. So trying to work with that piece, and also things do change over the years. Some of the networks that have been strong are not so strong at this point, and some new networks among people, not the bureaucracy so much, are starting to come more to the fore. So I think at this point, it's kind of a waste of time to be spending a whole lot of time with the government endeavors, other than what obviously is changing for the better. So I'm thinking a lot more about the community connections and trying to check around with some of the people who I know are really, really involved, and trying to actually do something. And there is a lot of that. So that's about it from me for the moment. And I'll pass it on to, I think, Pamela. Thank you, Pamela.
Yes, I wonder if somebody's able to extract some agenda items of all the rich things that are being shared so far. I've been a little tumbled, so bioregionally, what you were saying, Jan, about how it's possible for this space to be a champion for the work that we try to do, or try to find the words to talk about what we're doing, I think is really speaks to something that's close to my heart at the moment. And what I have found myself becoming increasingly interested in, especially now that we're also preparing with the government's JAM and this determination about earth regenerators and our role. And it's hard for me to not think of it in relation also to what is happening with the design school. And that's the big capital design school, as well as just our own individual projects that may or may not fall under the umbrella of the design school directly, but indirectly in terms of our inquiries into how to ignite a kind of bioregional consciousness in our communities. Like, starting, for me, it has to start on the community level, because this is where I live, and so this is where my this is the context that kind of defines the parameters of what my current capacities can operate within. Is this sufficiently confusing? Have I thrown enough disparate little bombs into the... Oh, that's not a good metaphor, bomb. Yeah, so a lot of musings and a lot of things that are happening here that, as I've mentioned before, I want eventually to get to the point of being able to talk my way into clarity. A lot of that, some of that, at any rate, has to do with First Peoples engagements here, but also even on a local level, which does intersect the governance structures. This community is so small that those aren't abstract and totally immovable objects. So it has some kind of interest for me to find out where I can fit. But I'm also with Tricia in the prayer space. And although you have disappeared, Tricia, from my view at any rate, I think there is so much for me to still delve into in that space where I deepen my connection to self and to my greater context. Yeah, so that's quite enough. I will pass to Preston, please.
Thanks, Pamela. I guess first, personally, whereas December and January, I had a lot of time to be able to engage with this process heavily. The last week or so has been much more tight. So the only things I've been doing bioregionally have been very specific Zoom calls. So I can sort of touch on some of that we're watching unfold. The Legacy Project had its first meeting of those that had gone to Joe's presentations. I think it was close to 30 people in that Zoom session. It wasn't an opportunity yet to get to know people. That will continue with the process, but it did give a chance to kind of see the overarching schedule at this point. They're focusing on right now prioritizing and communicating and digesting all the material that they pulled out of Joe's presentations. So the first 2 months is just going to be getting everybody to know each other a little bit and seeing where the clustering of expertise and interests and focus tends to first arise. And then they're looking at 6 months, 1 year, 2 years. They actually have funding for programming to be supportive to this group for 2 years. So it sounds very exciting, at least in the potential from that framework. They were able to release Joe's video, or actually Joe's audio and some video clips to go with it. His words to the participants that were here about what he saw and what he thought some of the limitations would be, and where to focus. A quick 10-minute presentation that was quite inspiring. And they've also, I think, released a first recording presentation with regards to large landscapes, and letting everybody know that if they know people in those realms that are interested, working, etc., please pass this along to those people to try to gain a little bit of steam in that process. Benji's been involved in that, so I'm sure he can add a few words as to where that's been unfolding. Second thing I joined was the Great Lakes Bioregional conversation this week, and that concept now of what's going to happen locally and that networking groups versus the larger picture of the group of groups is starting to form a little bit. So the Great Lakes Bioregional stuff at a large level will probably slow down and sort of play off of what is unfolding more locally, because everybody's very excited to try to get that aspect unfolding and put those energies there. So once again, it's about prioritizing and trying to create those patterns that will be able to be upheld for longer periods of time in relationships that are necessary to do that. So all in all, it's very exciting on those fronts. And me personally, we've been watching a little bit of warmer weather here, and because we're in the process of preparing the house we've been living in here for 5 years to sell, and it's got 2 rental units in it. I'm trying to get everything set up to be staged, to look exciting, to happy possible investors in this space. And so the backyard, I was where the water retention areas, which are lined with large gravel, they were still filled with leaves. So we had a 15-degree day on Wednesday, and I used that chance to move some of those leaves into bundles so they can be set off for composting. And it was funny because as I was doing it, I was thinking a little bit about how, you know, all the insects that are overwintering in that space and trying not to over disrupt that. So trying to find that balance between, you know, what we're trying to do at a level of living in this existence, and also that level of how to be conscientious of these ecological spaces, regardless of how big or small they are. So I've probably missed a few things, but I will leave it at that and we can go from there. I don't think I have anything specifically to add to the agenda. Chad, why don't you check in with us?
Yeah, that's good to hear what's happening in this bioregion. So I've actually been reaching out to some people, seeing if they might want to be part of the Great Lakes conversation. Perhaps it's a little late to the game, but there are some folks who might be showing up on the next call on Monday. We'll see. Yeah, I have other thoughts around that, around like what it means to be late to the game, or what are impediments to playing the game, and how we might distinguish the noise from the signal. Sitting with a lot of my own life, and yeah, and really appreciating that, you know, going back to that prayer space, like you were saying, Pamela, or I'm hearing a lot of that going around, you know, with Trisha, centering, coming back to center, coming back to the earth, and or even if it's about going back to the primordial sludge and finding some eternal flame there, right? It's like, yeah, because there's so much noise out there. So I think I'm sitting with how, like, having lived for a long time in the public policy space and never fully believing it, but having a sense like things were getting done there. And I do have some appreciation for that work, but, you know, at the same time, how much of it is a distraction that is paradoxically, I mean, I don't mean public policy work per se, and like just the mainstream conversation about pretty much anything is a distraction. So like attending to it, thinking that you're servicing the greater good is actually counterproductive, because you're getting caught up in the very thing that you're trying to, or hoping to transform, right? Yeah. So just sort of sitting with that. Yeah, I don't know. I read this article this morning in the Atlantic Monthly on it's kind of a disturbing article in a way. He's talking about he has a book called Revolt Against Humanity. So this is an adaptation from that, and he's saying, like, for the first time, we're having these philosophies, or these nascent movements that are like excited in one way or other about the demise of humanity. And so one is like the antinatalist movement, right? Humans are going extinct, and that's a we're the best. Or the transhumanist movement, like humans will extinct ourselves and create some sort of machinic deity that will replace us for like the cosmic betterment or something like. But like, it's disturbing for me because like in our groups or my own little bubble, it's not obvious that those are like, I mean, those aren't the only two options, right? So it's like, what is it that's perpetuating this, you know, like in like a national magazine like that, where you're just sort of giving voice to this binary choice. And why is binary thinking, right? Like, why is what we're trying to do here is so invisible? I don't know. You know, there's another book that I heard about the other day called Choosing Earth by Dwayne Elgin. And he has the same sort of, well, two options are like authoritarianism and extinction, and the third is transformation. So the book is about transformation. It's like, okay, what is about like, how can we tell our stories or do our or culture making, because I think it is culture making, really. Better. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. There's things going around in my head. Let's see.
Benji and Vita haven't gone yet.
Hey Benji, how you doing?
Good. I just had a flashback of recess when I was a kid. Like, pick me, pick me. That felt good. Rita, last but not least, for sure. Yeah. So I wanted to. This might ruffle some feathers, but I cannot believe, Chad. You may have seen this when you lived in Arizona, when you lived in Phoenix, but I just had these conversations with people at the top of the Colorado River watershed, and just got a deep sense of all of the, I've always had a sense growing up in the region of the controversy around the Colorado River. But I've seen a lot more of the story, and so much of Phoenix flood irrigates. Like, you'll see suddenly yards have like ponds that are like 2 feet deep everywhere. It's so insane. I couldn't believe it. But that's the thing bioregionally that's so present for me right now. It's just, man, that ruffled my feathers for sure. I was just stomping around, like, just couldn't believe that still is allowed. It demonstrates such a blindness to ecological realities. It's baffling. But on a positive note, somebody in the delta of the Colorado River got in touch with me, wanting to get in touch with the people in Paonia. So there's a conversation happening between the headwaters and the bottom. So that's encouraging. We'll see where that goes. As far as, I do have a couple little agenda items. Claire has yet to go, so she'll probably bring this up as well, but maybe we want to mention something about the community art workshop coming up. Brian just sent me an email today asking if he could invite people in the Tikaranto bioregion. I also, maybe we want to talk about this here, maybe not, but I've been mentioning this over the last several sessions, or I don't know exactly how long, but my focus will be shifting more and more to the design school. And part of that is getting the Zoom link or getting the Zoom account switched over for this session, the exploratory session, and then whatever other questions might arise around that process. Even though I really don't have a whole lot of clarity myself, I'd be willing to discuss that if that wants to be something we cover for a little bit. Lastly, just to tack on to Preston, the only other video that he didn't mention that isn't quite ready, but should be soon, is the conversation between Joe and Dr. Dan Longboat. Was that his name? That'll be a good one. But I'll be sharing, I asked Brian if I could share links to those in the upcoming newsletter. So the newsletter that I'll post hopefully Saturday, but probably Sunday, we'll have links to all of that stuff. So you can find it in one location. So I think that's all I have. And so Claire and Rita, but Rita, I'll pass to you next. And then Claire's last but not least, certainly not least.
Thanks, Benji. Good to see everyone. We're in the minus degrees here, but beautiful sunshine. Definitely winter and good snow cover, which is promising for the spring run off. Feels really good. We're still planning to gather some thought leaders on March 3rd, Friday, midday, to explore what's happening from their viewpoint, and if there's any interest in looking at the Eagle view through the bioregional regeneration process that Joe has laid out. We'll see. We're just holding that that's going to unfold in the best way, and keeping in touch with Paonia, because my right-hand person, Lisa, has moved over there and is active in the community in Paonia, along with Barb Chambliss, who she's found home with. And they're being part of the community meetings, but they're also going to be showing a series on glycophosphate that was on Humanity Rising. They're going to be showing 3 or 4 programs to the community on that coming up in the next couple of weeks. And they have, here in the community, we're going to be showing the Vandana Shiva film as a fundraiser for Seed Peace, which is an organization that raises seeds and has organic farming, and for our organization, and bring in the topic of bioregionalism on that. And that's Friday, March 24th. That's going to happen. So that's my report, and it's good to see everyone. So off to Claire.
Thanks, Rita. Yeah, there were a few things that were raised by others that kind of really pick up with my check-in. I think just the real hands-on experience of something that we raised last Friday, but staying at the Eco Village and realizing just the messiness of doing this work, and I was hearing what you were saying, Chad, with policy, having worked on policy, having put a lot of energy into building what should really be support scaffolding for living more regenerate, like being able to do this work, and seeing that often being quite, in a way, there's a it feels temporary, because you get another government that comes in, they wipe out the policy, or they do those things. And really what it shows me, and when I see the Eco Village, which is actually struggling, it's got so much to offer the community, and so much that would be lost if it was to be lost. And it's in a very, very tenuous place right now. Brandy's health is actually really poor, and she's the main person kind of holding it all together. But is how, like, it really sort of, I've been thinking about it more and more, is how do we, the only way that I see that there is a sort of sense of resilience, but also the ability to bring in the prayerful part that has been raised, because I think that is such a critical piece, is when we do things that are part of the daily practice, where it then can become part of the culture that is then carried by a broad base of people, then that gets spread out. But when it is sort of held by a few people that could actually just get, like, if that disappears, how much other stuff gets lost with it? I just, like, that just really stands out to me. And it was really brought home to me from a conversation I had with a friend who's been on here before, Anna Cowan. I don't know if some of you remember her. She was from South Africa, or she is from South Africa. Just sort of the most bizarre synchronicity about this, but we'd been in elementary school together, we'd been in sort of preschool together, and then in boarding school at various points, and other very sort of connecting points along the way, and then found each other here. And I'm going down to South Africa in June, and we'll be connecting with her and the project she's doing, and she's done phenomenal work. And she said, you know, she's at the stage in her life where it needs to come from a place, the work she does now needs to come from a place that is very much heart-centered. She's not willing to kind of pour the energy into trying to create a huge infrastructure. It kind of will come from doing the work that she can where she is, and the kitchen conversations with the other woman, often in the small town where she is, like the farm kitchen tables, and I was like, that really hit me strongly, because yeah, anyway, I just wanted to bring in, sorry, I shouldn't, this isn't my check-in. I just wanted to bring in the messiness that I'm seeing in the Cowichan bioregion. The fact that stuff feels very temporary if it doesn't have a stronger base of the culture that needs to have been developed. And if it's not rooted in this what is sacred, it's very transient, and it actually burns people out. So I think that's what I wanted to bring. And actually, it's kind of like, if I had to bring an agenda item, that would be kind of one of the things to talk about. I just want to bring in a couple of other things. Midi brought it up. It was being on the Edgewalker community. That has just been unlocking so many incredible parts, including, connecting to the work that's going on in Portland, Oregon with Mark Lakeman. I just can't believe how those connections just kind of happened, because the people that are the person I connected with is working closely with Quinn, who is on this platform, but who I was, got to know, and we were trying to make that connection, and it's just kind of happening over here. But it really brings the community arts in strongly, and I feel like that's very alive. And then the last piece is just so grateful and excited to have Benji supporting, trying to get the conversation around the role of community art as one of the pieces that help to hold that sacred center. So I'm excited about what's happening on Wednesday. Or maybe one last piece just to put in there is that we also had a conversation with Ben Roberts, who's planning the bioregional, the summit last year, Regenerative Bioregional Summit for May, and thinking that there would be a strong, bringing in a community arts component conversation. And I'm just really excited how these conversations just keep coming up, because man, I've waited a very long time for people to get excited about this. So it's cool to see that happening. Thank you.
Great. We've got about 40, a little bit less than 40 minutes left. And it's been a longer check-in. And I think, if we look, maybe there's, I think one of the big topics has been this resilience and meaning and continuing on in the messiness, and in some ways our longer check-in, I think, is a way of supporting each other in that. And so maybe what we need to do is just weave together either a dedicated time for that so we can go into it more, or just that every few weeks we just have longer check-ins like this, which allow us to speak into that more. And then maybe other times we can go into more other things to do with bioregionalism. So I'm just looking through some of the things I think that we had as topics. I think the whole what's happening in the Salmon Nation and Edgewalker is, two of you know a lot about that, and there seems to be some learning that we could have that almost feels like a topic there. And I had the whole question about Hilo and what's happening there versus Mighty Networks and something about that. The looking at how do we raise up the role of our experience together as being champions for kind of how to bring in our collective cultural learning into the bioregional work we're doing. Felt like a topic. The design school at different scales, sort of like that was mentioned by Pamela. But one of the things that stands out as kind of a time limited piece is Benji's role, and if there's a transition there and how we need to discuss that and relate to that, and maybe look at what you want to say about that, or how we acknowledge the enormity of that transition, what that means, both tangibly, like things like Zoom, but what it means in terms of the huge, long, dedicated, committed, skillful process that you've brought to this role and what that means in terms of what that shift might be like. But I see Mitty has her hand up. So those are just kind of throwing out some of the things I noticed that we talked about, and knowing that we probably can't do justice to them all, but just knowing that Benji's role feels like a significant one to address fairly soon. Mitty.
Yes, that all sounds really important. And I just wanted to note I've added to the agenda in the notes an announcement I want to make for regenerative constellation workshops opportunity, and an invitation we've received.
Benji, there's Ben coming in. Hi, Ben. We're at the last half hour of the meeting and looking at kind of agenda items after a long check-in. Benji, do you want to say a bit more about what this might mean? Does that feel like a good place? Other people feel like we need to go?
Yeah, I'm happy to. Yeah, I'm really trying to grasp for clarity, and I just don't have much of it. I do know for sure that what I'm about to step into is going to take a lot of my being. I'm going to be moving to Barichara, and I'm going to be doing everything I can to support the maturation of the Barichara ecoversity. I really see, as Joe has communicated time and again, and as time rolls on more often, that it's so important for us to have an exemplar of what these bioregional learning centers are, what these ecosystems of learning that are patterned onto features and functions of the landscape, how important it is to see that, how important it is to see projects coming together and integration around that and sharing and deepening purpose and identity. I'm just so excited to pour all my energies into that, so that people can come visit and embody that and feel into the story and bring that sense of possibility back to their bioregions. And then, in addition to that, there's going to be a whole lot of work in the cultivating, the weaving of the planetary scale educational platform as well. So I'm just going to be really, really busy. I can sense that. And so what that means for me here is completely up in the air. I don't know. We'll find out more and more as time goes on, but I think my intention is to not lose the relationships that I've formed over the last 2-3 years. I've got a lot of relationships that I really value. I feel like I've got some amazing coaches in my corner, and I care more about the relationships than like the container of the bioregional catalyst, right? That's just a construct we came up with to organize these conversations, and it will continue on in whatever form it takes, given the new purpose, the new collection of people, how it relates to the design school. That's all up in the air too. So and then Jan, you mentioned the few little logistical pieces, passing over Zoom, and I heard mention of ritual. What kinds of rituals do you all want in terms of how you share the recordings to these, how you structure these meetings, all that'll be passed off. So yeah, I don't know if there's stuff there that brings up questions, inquiries, comment. Meaty, I see your hand. Maybe I'll pass it off now before I muddy the waters. I tend to do that.
Benji, it's I can't tell you how thrilled I am to know you're going to Barichara. I've been holding this dream for you, and many of us have. And it's so wonderful, first and not least, because it says that you're feeling strong enough to go, and that's the best news of all.
Yeah.
But secondly, because I think it will transform so much for us. And I don't know whether it counts as ritual, but I'd like to, gosh, I'm going to be really presumptuous in this space. I'd love to issue an invitation to Joe, Penny and Benji to meet with bioregional catalysts to explore how can we be the best possible support to the design school. How can the design school continue to feed what you as individuals actually have, particularly you and Penny, have over the years given us? And how can we make sure that Earth Regenerators and the design school and bioregional catalysts are all perfectly in alignment? Because it's going to be messy. And as long as our hearts and souls are aligned and there's space for the sacred between us and full communication, I have total confidence that 1 + 1 + 1 plus many others equals many more than the individual sums of the ones included. So that's what I don't know whether it's ritual. I don't know whether it's just a straightforward meeting or what and how it is, but it feels really important for this to happen. And also acknowledging that Joe and Penny are off to Missouri for the funeral, that may elongate things, but we're here and ready to hold the conversation. And I think for once I can say we and feel confident that everyone will say yes. Maybe not, but I'm going to risk it anyway.
Yeah. I think I can respond fairly briefly. I do want to be cognizant of the other agenda items as well. I will have that conversation with Joe and Penny. I think that they are exploring possibilities for meeting with this group. To have that sort of conversation. And Joe is no longer going to Missouri. He's decided against it. He's talked to all of the people in Missouri whom he had questions whether or not they needed his presence. And it's been communicated that he's been out of that social system for 25 years. And he's given the support to the few people that he's needed to sufficiently through Zoom calls or phone calls. So he's going to be around in Bioregional next week. So maybe it's something we can do then. And then lastly, I am feeling better. I was actually, Grace, I wanted to ask you if the person that you're in contact with in Devon is Isabel Carlisle, because I was just on a call with Irvi, who's staying at Isabel Carlisle's house, and she pops up on Zoom and she's in that beautiful office space that Isabel Carlisle has with the timber framing behind. I was like, are you at Isabel Carlisle's house right now? So she's there. And I was telling her how much better I feel. I was telling her that just the other day I was on a hike and I sprung up. There was this little step onto this rock and I sprung up and I felt just so in control of my body. So there's of course roller coasters still, but to have moments like that is super encouraging. So yeah, to let you all know, it's going well. Lots of healing ahead of me, but I've made a ton of progress. Yeah. Pamela.
I think this follows kind of nicely on that spring that you're talking about, Benji. That is just incredible. I love hearing that. And also, I think it kind of works with what you're saying too, Needy. This is huge. All of this is huge. And your moving out of the bioregional space, Benji, is huge. And I think that one of the things that this space does is celebration, ceremony, ritual. And I can see how you can't just walk out the door without there being a party. And I think it would be wonderful to have a party, ritual, celebration, name it what you will. If Joe and Penny showed up for that, I think that would just be double plus good. And it would be terrific fun to launch you into the new space. And I love that you're going to continue to have some kind of connection here. I don't think you can get away without being connected here. So we're not going to let you go entirely, mister. Okay, Grace.
Yes, and I also was excited about the idea of rituals and bringing rituals into these spaces and some sorts of props of moving a hat from somebody else, one place to another, or changing your hat, or some kind of baton, or having ritual symbols that we use. And I was also just thinking about the seasons and how this is sort of happening at the end of the winter and the beginning of spring, at least in the northern hemisphere, and you're going to the southern hemisphere, so maybe it's the opposite. But it's sort of that there is a place in these groups for different rituals, which connects to what you were saying about the longer check-ins. And I started a women's group a few weeks ago, and we just didn't know what I was doing, but I just couldn't be around men's spaces for a while, and a bunch of us felt the same. And the amount of things that got done in 6 weeks was extraordinary. And the amount of time we spent talking about what we were going to do was very, very small. It was almost like the meetings were a check-in and a check-out, and 3 minutes of, oh yeah, and we got to talk about, when are we having a party for Benji? And then the party would happen, right? And there's something quite profound about just being related to where people are, that then when you speak about the ritual, it's like all of us were like, oh yeah, let's plan the ritual now, because there was something rhythmic about how we talk to each other. And then it was like, okay, ritual time for a rhythm, time for a beat. And we were kind of beating together. And so then the doing part is so small when the relating is deep. And so I'm not sure, I feel like I'm totally new to this space, but I'm not sure that there's this necessity of oh, that check-in was too long. Was it? I don't think so. Anyway, Claire.
Oh, Grace, I'm so happy to be able to follow you. Yeah, I just, gosh, who was it that, but it was around the ritual. And I know what I wanted to bring in was just that through the Culture Center, we recognized how important that was, and just how it's not a part of many of our regular experiences as a regular rhythm piece. And so we've actually chosen the equinoxes and the solstices as some of the markers, but there have been other ones like Imbolc that happened about 2 weeks ago. But we've been hosting ceremonies. So just if you don't know about them, they are digitally online, which is kind of, there's a limitation there, but at the same time, it's holding space and I guess demystifying that process for people who maybe haven't had that experience. And so that perhaps they will feel inspired to take it to the communities on the ground, which is where we really want it to go. But all I want to say is how much I appreciate what you brought in with the slowing down and and just how much really can get done without actually setting about trying to get that much done. It's when it was important, that's what got done. And those slower spaces and women's connecting, there is something pretty special that happens there. And I think it's worth naming it, not as a, it's often set up as a polarization between male and female. It's not. It's recognizing something that goes on that gets missed when we don't talk about it like that. So I just want to appreciate that.
So I wonder, Claire, I don't think I was able to get to a culture center kind of organization meeting. And I wonder whether there's an opportunity with the coming equinox to actually do something in relation to what we're talking about here, because it's not just bioregional catalyst that is affected within ER by this wonderful setting up of the design school, and Benji moving and Daniel Gonzalez getting over to Barachara shortly. It's like there's a confluence of energy. So I wonder whether it might be possible to bring the kind of ritual element in through Culture Centre at March Equinox, or whether there's something else already planned.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that that's what the Culture Centre was supposed to be, is this. I mean, we haven't really set it up. It isn't working the way it needs to be working because there just isn't the capacity and there aren't the numbers of people. But really, it's supposed to see what's arising in the Earth Regenerators community. And what is, should be a responsiveness so that it gets actually folded into what, like the celebrating, which actually then becomes the culture. And we do try and bring the arts into that as well, which in another way starts to kind of create a way of sort of kind of like imprinting or holding up what we're valuing. So.
And in association with that, if the Culture Centre were to hold the flow for ritual, I'm hearing from Benji there's some very practical stuff, and that's where I tend to get involved, because I'm always seem to be where the rubber meets the road of what does this mean in terms of logistical Lumio accounts. What does it mean in terms of those of us who might have been supporting the Benji, Joe, Penny team through Patreon, who maybe want to transfer to support them through the design school, etc., etc. There are lots of practicals. So I'd love to explore the opportunity for that kind of practical logistical meeting to happen as well.
Yeah, Mehdi, can I just respond to that? I thank you so much for bringing that up, because I think the Culture Centre's capacity has been limited. And so we're trying to do the best job we can, but really it needs to involve the people who, where that's bubbling up from, they need to be involved in that conversation, absolutely. So maybe we can have a conversation afterwards and try and figure out who needs to be reached to be invited to that. So, and anyone else that has ideas about who needs to be included in that conversation. Yeah, thanks, Mehdi, very much.
Yeah, thank you, Mehdi, for broadening this transition that we're noticing, that we're feeling with Benji and this specific space to the larger transitions, and then bringing that into Equinox, which feels like in this part of the hemisphere that I'm in and that most of us are in, is a springing forth, a opening into that spring-like energy. So sometimes I think we might be wanting to do rituals that are just about a transition that maybe doesn't fit with the natural one that's happening at the time of year. And so, but this one does seem to be. So I'm hearing both some energy and possibility for acknowledging this larger transition, the specific aspect of Benji's uncertain transition, which I think is perfect. It's like, you know, there's a big step for you to be going to Barachara, is huge for this design school to be started, is huge for you to be working in the design school and taking these years of skill and energy and putting it towards that is huge. And also the fact that you want to stay connected here is also equally huge, I think. So just weaving all those together, acknowledging those. And then there's the larger logistics again that Mehdi named, and then the very specific ones about, yeah, like, and I don't know quite who does or how does those things, but, and also we need to know how to do those things. So both in terms of the specifics, when there is transition, within ER, or probably in the design school, who does certain aspects of logistics. We really need to name those things, because we can, if we don't, we're like, and so the learning of how we do that means the learning of how our communities on the ground do these things too. How we do logistics, how we get grounded, how do we deal with the detail, and also how do we do the larger transition rituals? How do we do that here? It's a great learning for how we do that in our home communities on the ground, the bioregion. So I think it's just always taking the learning from here and going, how I did that here. It's like that, back to that championing. How do we take what we were learning here and weave it into communities that aren't so virtual, hopefully. I'll put my hand down, and if there's anybody else that wants to speak to any of this and or anything else that's kind of hanging around the agenda. Thanks, Pamela, for rescuing me. And then we'll probably move into doing a bit of a checkout.
Can I briefly respond to something
Yeah.
that Meaty brought up? Because several of you have been supporting me on Patreon, and I've been so grateful. That's been huge. I really appreciate that. And I am understanding that my transition and change of relationship may be the impetus for people to discontinue that kind of support. And particularly if you're interested in joining the design school and you've got this budget and you're, $25 is going to me, and like that would make the difference in you joining the design school, please discontinue support of me on Patreon. I'll be good. So I wanted to throw that out there. I wanted to just be very transparent that there's going to be no weird feelings. So yeah, that's all I wanted to throw in there. And over to Pamela.
Yeah, you're sweet, Benji. I just wanted to know whether or not the Zoom conversation needed to be addressed immediately. Like, what's the timeline for that? So that's over to you, Benji.
Is there a Zoom ER account? There must be, right? Because there's so many Zoom meetings on ER. There must be somebody who is the coordinator for that. Does anybody know who that is? Is that Kath?
It's usually Kath, but she's still in transition. Lillian is also a Zoom administrator.
Might be as
Maybe this
simple as
could come up to the governance jam group later today as kind of one of the tangibles of some governance stuff that we could be looking at.
yeah, and I think that any host of Bioregional Catalyst has the ability to change that Zoom link. So if you guys come up with a new Zoom link in the governance jam, anybody who's a host can just make the swap.
I know that Ben Roberts has a couple of like industrial Zoom links that he might be happy to volunteer, like the ones that can, we don't need it, but like ones that take up to 500 people. And I know that he's pretty willing to share those if people need them.
Is there anything else that's time sensitive that we want to talk about in the next 5 or 10 minutes? Not to take the host role, but I just wanted to surface it.
I just was wondering again, just staying on the Zoom piece, is there enough capacity on the existing ER Zoom link to share that link, or should we be, say, approaching Vivero for, helping to support fund a Zoom link or something like where there's a collective, I know that we're looking at supporting the Mighty Networks fee, and just wondering what it just seems like a natural fit would be Vivero to go through, and then people contribute to that. But I guess it's the existing capacity. And
Claire, I'm not sure about that, because I think there is a governance decision to be made around what is the ER fund and what is Vivero, because Vivero started very clearly as a beneficiaries and contributors, and operating costs for the whole of ER is kind of a different category. and we have it's messy. We get these questions and then they require us to make governance decisions, but I think that's something that could perhaps go to the governance jam, like Jan was saying earlier. But my sense is that at the moment there isn't anything that is conflicting with bioregional catalyst time, so that at least the Friday session could be just a simple transfer of Zoom meeting link, and perhaps we could do that pretty quickly. I don't know who's a host on Bioregional Catalyst, but I know that Liliane is traveling as well as Kath, so if it can be held over for a little while, that might be easier. Yeah.
Great. Well, we got a thumbs up from Benji that this needs to happen, but we're not like out of here next week or something. So that's great. So that's helpful to get the heads up, the kind of scramble, and then knowing that a decision needs to be made. That's again, a good learning process for how to do group work. And I think there's other pieces that have been named in the agenda, but I'm also looking at the time. And so unless anybody puts their hand up quickly saying we want to MIDI, say something else that's new, and then we'll go into a checkout.
Yes, I've just got to announce that I heard yesterday from Annalika, who during Ben Roberts' wonderful bioregional process offered regenerative constellations. She's actually offering a series of 3 online regenerative constellation workshops, especially for the Earth Regenerators community. She's offering them on March the 15th, April the 5th, and April the 19th. She's particularly interested to offer space to people who might want a bioregional focus. And I will be posting sometime as soon as possible a message in Mighty Networks. But is it okay to post it in Bioregional Catalysts as well as on the main Mighty Networks channel, because it feels bioregional in focus? I've thought perhaps people like Rita, Anna in the Great Lakes, there are people for whom it could be really useful now. Preston, I think the Great Lakes kind of, my experience with the regenerative constellation is that this could be an amazing time to surface the undercurrents that could kind of promote things to get to and issues along the road. So please contact me if you, I don't have the capacity to put the PDF into this thing. It says your admin is the only person who can post a PDF file. So, but I can send, if any of you want to send me a direct message in Mighty Networks chat, if you want more information, and I will post it as soon as possible. Thank you. Thank you for the time to share that. It was really wonderful. And there's in the PDF link, there is a glowing commendation from the Regenerosa Collective, which actually participated in a constellation which they found very meaningful. So Benji, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Mita. You reminded me to promote just a couple of things briefly. The first being on Monday, the Great Lakes Basin Bioregional Conversation that's been hosted by Jonathan Cloud is going to host an ACT matrix session to discover values, direction, and that will be hosted by Anna. And I get the impression that she's a pretty talented facilitator, and I may have frozen, you all froze for me, but I'll keep going. Okay. All right. I'm seeing nods. And so I'm really looking forward to that. Of course, if you do attend, we'll probably be asking those who are within the region to participate and others to be just observers. Since we're not there, we don't want to determine their values. And then on Wednesday, the community art workshop, the community art for bioregional learning workshop that Claire and I are going to host together. I'm really looking forward to that. Just wanted to extend the invitation to everybody. We intend for it to just be the start of something much broader and bigger, larger process. Have no idea how exactly, but hopefully we'll know the next steps to take after we do that, after we broadcast and socialize this conversation a little bit more. So very much looking forward to that, and then recognizing Claire too. You got such an important story, Claire. So that's enough for me.
Great. That's another thing just to note, that there needs to be an announcement time section in these meetings as well. So we're kind of at the last bit, so maybe just a 1 or 2 or 3 word brief checkout. And poor Ben came in and he hasn't said a word, so maybe you could have 7 words. The check-in, check-out. So anybody that wants to start and then pass it along.
I'll just say grateful, very grateful. Over to you, Preston.
It's been fascinating to see a little bit of the background of the machinations. That said, I've been very tired, so I'm going to rewatch this later and sort of touch on. I heard my name come up towards the end there, but I wasn't able to fully digest what was going on. So I'll review again and get back to Midi, and I'll pass off to Midi.
My to-do list gets longer, but it feels very productive, so I'm okay with it. Just for people, if you find I'm not responding to you when you think I should, I feel I'm holding 3 people's role at the moment, and I do drop things, so please feel very free to nudge me. Ben, I'd love to pass to you. We haven't heard from you. It's so good to see you.
Thanks, Midi. Yeah, I'd say my brief word themes for the moment are recollecting and remembering, and just dipping back in here briefly. I've been on a kind of winter sabbatical down in the Eastern Sierra Mountains, southern Eastern California. Amazing landscape, just incredible place. And big winter, been out skiing and climbing and biking and hiking and just savoring this incredible landscape that I've had some time with back earlier in my life, and it's been great to remember this place as well. Listening a little bit for signs and signals of bioregionalism in these parts, and not picking up on too much in my brief stay here. But yeah, looking forward to return to my project up north in a couple of weeks. So part of that is sort of reviving a bit of spring energy and connecting with what's brewing and alive in this space. So nice to return and hear several of you. And yeah, I'll keep tabs, look a little deeper into notes and recordings and such, and see where to plug in going forward. I will hand over to Pam.
I'm in that prayer space frame. I like that. RJ. RJ, do you want to go next?
RJ, are you there? Are you frozen? You look like you're going to speak, but nothing's happened yet.
Pass it to Claire.
We'll get back to you, RJ, maybe. Claire.
Yeah, just I'm grateful.
Yes.
Oh.
Feels like Spirin and in this room. Yes. Did you hear me? Oops. Yeah. Good.
Okay. Have you finished, RJ? Yeah. Just really grateful, but also just so appreciating the fact that there's this collective sense making and remembering and putting it together so that I feel like I can't possibly keep track of this, and it's just stirring it up and prioritizing feels important. So thank you. I'm going to pass to Grace.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, this feels really productive. And I'm really grateful for the fact that there's a directionality about it. It's not just a bunch of people talking, so it's always great to come here. And I will pass to Chad.
Yeah, mainly observing, and I'm observing what seems like a ship being steered through what could be turbulent waters with skilled hands on deck. Mainly all the women here taking it forward. So, let's see, who's yet to go? Claire.
I think this is Jan, isn't it? Jan,
Claire,
did you go?
Yeah, I guess it's just me. So, yeah, a sense of delight of being in a meeting where we can weave from a place of fragility and distrust and downness into logistic into and having that service of the earth in our bioregions. That just feels really, really rich, and I appreciate you a lot, and we'll pick it up again and many other times and see you at other gatherings. So thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Wonderfully held, Jen. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Bye all.
Bye-bye.